Hello, everybody. Welcome to this surprise Sunday session of Truth in Virginia and what are we going to do to change it? I am so blessed to have this guest, Tiffany for Broad Run from Loudoun County. It is rare in this fight that I have found someone that when I listen to them speak, it's like it's coming out of my own mouth. So I wanted to share this.
The most important job I will ever have is being a mother. And the most important thing that I could be doing right now is standing up to defend the education of my children. For the email that was ignored last year regarding my concerns about New Zealand,
So I think somebody just pointed out that the sound may have dropped on her live there, which has been happening annoyingly. I don't know what's going on, but I will share that to start out with again. But so Tiffany, I'm going to bring her on. But so what she just said there was she spoke specifically to one thing that I have recently been saying, and that is that the only historically marginalized children that this state should be talking about is the special education children. And I get really upset about this because I've sat in school board meetings and watched parents plead with our school board in Chesterfield County to, one, my child sits in a crap-filled diaper all day. We know how much money they get historically, and then you add the ARP money involved, but we don't have aides. We have IEPs being falsified. We have parents being lied to. We have parents taking out second mortgages on their houses because all they want is help taking care of their children that they've had to pull out and they have to now pay because for years they pleaded with the school to evaluate their children who are severely dyslexic. And now that they are reading, we have another parent, her child, she has had to pull out because her seventh grader reads at a third grade level and was suicidal. And they took her to court and they found her guilty of truancy. That's how we treat our special education children and their parents. So to hear Tiffany speak on that is that is an issue that is across the board, one that is ignored. And when I say ignored, I mean Jillian Balow got a warning letter from the Department of Education because James Lane was found egregiously vacant in his duty to take care of special education, due process, and all of that. And then this week, they got awarded for the 11th year in a row for being stupendous in special education. So to hear her speak about that, and then also is that when we elect officials, is that we elected them to do something and that we hold them accountable for it. So I'm so excited and to bring Tiffany on, and she's really set the bar high. And for everybody, is whether it's Chesapeake, Suffolk, everybody that's running to do something different in this state, and there's many. Those of us, like Chesterfield, we have all in, all out. We don't do anything until November 2023. So Tiffany is setting the bar high that it's okay as an educator, number one, to run hard on hard issues and to be unapologetic about it. And so I'm sure those of you that know me know that she is my spirit animal because we randomly met, and everything that comes out of her mouth is 100% what I've been talking about. So it is an honor to have her on here. And so here, welcome, Tiffany. How are you?
Thank you, Anne. I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing great.
Thank you. I want to give you a huge thanks for allowing me to come onto your show and elevate my voice. That has been my chief concern since the beginning of my fight as a parent related to the issues about what's happening in our school system. And the reason that I'm running for school board, number one, is because I am a parent. I am a mother of 2 children in Loudoun County Public Schools, and my family moved to Loudoun County for their great school system, or at least that's what we thought. So
you know what? You're not, do you know, I've had 6 parents that came from New Jersey who have contacted me and said, we moved here for a red state that was better education. And she said, we should have stayed where we were. So to hear, I've never heard that from you before. That just made me go, yep.
Yeah. And you know, I think it's important for people to understand the human side of me as well. You know, I'm not just someone who's making videos in my living room about my concerns about policy. I'm a person, I'm a mother, and I have a family. So when we came here in 2020 from Fauquier County, which is where we began to raise our family 12 years ago, we found that instead of learning about history and English, grammar, and maybe being able to construct a coherent 5-paragraph essay, other things were at play, other things were happening. So what led me into my fight as a mother was an English assignment that my son received in his 7th grade English class, where he was asked to watch a TED Talk video about the Asian massage parlor murders, if you recall that, in March of 2021. He had to watch a TED Talk video where he was told to acknowledge himself as an oppressor, to acknowledge white privilege, to deconstruct what once was. So this is what he was learning in English. And I would not have known this had he come to me and said, Mom, what happened in the Georgia massage parlor?
How old was he?
And I said, where
How old was he?
He was in 7th grade. He was 12. Yeah, 12, getting ready to turn 13. So, I said, go get your Chromebook. That's how that started. So
Amen.
Go get your Chromebook. I found everything. I watched it all. I said, you are not finishing this assignment. That's not going to happen. And this is not because I think it's important for the audience to understand, this is not because I'm trying to shelter my child.
Correct.
This is because I want to preserve a proper foundational education for my child. Because
I think that's a thing that not many people are talking about, to make it all politics removed, is what I tell people. Children get this tiny window where they are allowed innocence, and then it's gone forever. And so when somebody wants to step in and expose my child and destroy, it's murdering childhood, period. And that there are things that you don't even need to argue about that a child should not be exposed to. and so that baffles me that so 7th grade, how you would equate parlor murders.
Yes, 7th grade, and I, with my background in education, because I have been in the field of special education for over 20 years, because I can speak their language, because I know how to dissect, I asked specifically, what standard in 7th grade English does this relate to? And I was told it has to do with nonfiction text, comprehension of nonfiction text. So just so you know, Anne,
For TED Talk.
the New York Times lesson of the day is now also comprehension of nonfiction texts according to the VDOE. And that's part of the problem that we have in our standards. They are so nebulous. They are not formally, there's no formal operational definition. They are absolutely subjective. And you've got the National Education Association, the American Federation of Teachers, the special interest groups where that muddy water is trickling from the very top down, giving the blessing to these teachers and telling them, please embrace, please teach about white supremacy. Please teach these kids about implicit bias. And that's how it gets into our classrooms. That's how it comes in.
Yes. And there's your puppy. That's, you know, the union, when I was doing the shows with Deb Fulman, is trying to understand the money and the role that especially the NEA, because believe it or not, Weingarten and the AFT have kind of bowed out of a lot of this after they did their mask destruction with Walensky. But is that the NEA, I know that everybody all over Twitter was all over their conference, but they're change agents is what they are, is that nothing that they talk about has to do with education. And so they are policy drivers. They are, along with people, is that you have also got the National Association of Elementary School Principals that are also lobbying groups. And they have lobbying for more federal funding. It's the National Association of School Psychologists. And we can do a different show on how they have all changed their standards. So there's nobody in any of these associations that's actually objectively driving to teach the children education.
Right. And you know what? I don't fault. The other thing is, I think it's important for people to hear, because that while I'm advocating for our kids, I also am advocating for our teachers. I'm 100%. Advocating for our teachers because they are terrified to speak up. They are terrified to come forward and say, you know what? I'm thinking about this issue critically, and I don't agree with this. And I don't think this is what we should be teaching our children. But they can't say that. Instead, they're being funneled into these equity trainings where they're being told that they have implicit bias and that they're going to be disciplining their students differently based on their skin color. And that is a slap in the face to teachers.
Right. And that's why I know that people have seen me show the binder. And I promise y'all that's my next goal. But and the reason I call this the Holy Grail, because it's not just Chesterfield oriented, is because they're using the National Board Professional Teaching Standards, which is endorsed by the NEA. So this is who everybody is using to do their professional education. And we talked about, which you guys have a contract with, is understanding history and ourselves. What is that? Teaching history, but that's what their sole source. But if you are a teacher, and when I go through this manual is brainwashing, because it goes through strictly about why you don't know you have implicit bias. And and so if you are a teacher that is because you have the ones that have been doing it forever and who know it's wrong, and that and then you have some that are like, well, maybe it has changed, or it has everything I've taught my whole life. I've been doing it through this lens that I didn't know I had, and that just treating all children the same is wrong. And so I'm like, we'll pick it apart. But like what you talked about is that this is what they're doing. And then when they don't pass it, they have another chance to take it. And then they have to, and if they don't pass it, so it's indoctrination. If you don't believe in this and you fail it, you have to do it again until you say you agree with it. And you have to, in order to pass, you have to create a gallery walk. So we talk about like privilege walks. So you have to create something, a gallery walk of images, and you have to like, you can't just fake that you believe in it. Like you have to that create something that's then going to be like for everybody participating to see, that you have to create it. So yes, it's not just our teachers, and we have them, I say being pushed out, but being forced to quit or retire, take early retirement, or you get nothing right now on the spot. James River High School, he taught for 30 years, and I have people from that high school that he changed their children's lives. And because he disagreed and he was bold enough to say it, within 2 weeks, he was out. And Coach Yanta is amazing, but he's one of the very few because they're just leaving in droves. And what's going to be left is the ones they're bringing in, or the ones that are a part of whatever EA, the Winchester, the VEA, the CEA, the LA. We know it's so essential that people understand what their role, because I believe that the second that they actually get collective bargaining status in this state, sealed deal. Like there's no way it'll ever go back. We won't ever recover anything, because they are what in, the history of the last 100 years, they're change agents. They're specifically there to create chaos and the appearance that all of this is real because I'm a teacher. You have to listen to me because I'm a teacher. Is that they have a specific goal. And so anyway, I just want to, you as a teacher, I think is the amazing thing, because there are a lot of teachers running for school board currently in smaller areas.
Right. And, while I have experience teaching in public settings, private settings, I'm no longer teaching. I don't teach anymore. I work as a board-certified behavior analyst. However,
wow. Okay.
we're still in the field of special education here because I work with autistic children, and I do direct applied behavior analysis treatment for the clients that I work with. And I also oversee registered behavior technicians who work with the patients that come into our facilities. So while I'm not in the classroom per se anymore, I am still embedded in the field of special education. That's where I started when I was a sophomore at George Mason University studying psychology. And that's where I am now as a 40-year-old mom. So I've made my entire life about children, whether it's my own or the children that I work with every day and their families. And as someone who is a board-certified behavior analyst, part of my role is to advocate for the families that I work with. So I have acted as an advocate for families that I work with, helping them through the process of understanding the IEP meetings and what their rights are as parents. I watched it on when I was a teacher. I watched what would happen to some of these kids where they would shuffle them around. They would place them in settings that were not necessarily appropriate for them. And then when I questioned it, I would hear, well, placement doesn't really matter. It's just where, we're just going to put them where we need them to be to make the numbers work. Yeah. And that is not for our kids. So I think it's important for people to know whatever side you fall on, whatever you believe in, whether you believe we have identity politics in our curriculum or not, I'm here to tell you we do, but I am not a single issue candidate. I am someone who is openly advocating for the needs of all of our kids and saying, you don't get to take these parents and push them in a corner, whether it's a parent who didn't want their child to have to wear a mask to school, or doesn't want their daughter to share a bathroom with a boy, or it's a parent who's fighting for the individual needs of their child with an IEP. And I am well versed. And like I said, I speak their language. and I am ready to come in to this ring and fight. And that's what we have to have on our school boards now. This is not Loudoun County in particular. This is a referendum on school boards across this entire country, Anne.
And that includes not co-signing with your superintendent over, because that in Chesterfield is they've given everything, they vote strictly on what the superintendent says, but people don't know that the school board hires the superintendent. The school board has and that's what, when we're looking for new superintendents, it's, Orange County, they have two amazing women who are doing what they were elected to do in a small, I went up there and I witnessed what we think isn't going on because it's small town Virginia. No. And so they're the first ones to really take the seat. And so those are who the women that we support, that we need to be there for, as we elect new people. But they were very strong in interviewing superintendents as to what the expectation was, and that they were not becoming a part of the superintendent school board oligarchy cabal that's in it together. Because then that's when you have that in your school board and your administration, there's no one to go to. You can't do anything.
No. And you're exactly right. The superintendent works for the school board. It is not the other way around. And until we get people on that school board with a spine who are going to stand up and say, I'm not voting based on your recommendation, which is what happened when everything went down with the masks in January. If you recall, the executive order came out and they dug their heels in and said, oh, no. Well, we're going to continue to mandate masks, right? And that was at the recommendation of the superintendent.
Yes.
And the people on our school board that voted to continue mandating masks for our kids, they did so based on
legal counsel
advice, right?
Yes.
So
I have our chairman recorded, because in Virginia, I'm the first person. We met for hours and hours of coffee, and I have it recorded, that they voted prior. Now, Chesterfield County voted on transgender word for word on a 3 Republican, 2 left-wing communists, I call them. A 3-person Republican board voted based on legal counsel. And when our superintendent, Merv Doherty, the day before the school board meeting, made the statement that because Norm Oliver said that they should follow the CDC guidance, I was like, it's sealed. Like, there's not even, he's already said what's going to happen. But when you have school boards that their politics don't align with things like the transgender, like I've had multiple meetings that they don't agree with it. We had one member, she abstained from voting instead of having a spine enough to say no. But because they were told that they would be sued, not by the state, but by the ACLU. They completely discounted what's safe for children. And that's the thing about the bathrooms. And we have had multiple sexual assaults in Chesterfield County. The beginning of the year, a boy was dragged into a boys' bathroom by other boys, and with a broom was physically assaulted. A girl was raped at Thomas Dale by a boy dragged into a bathroom. And is that when you tell teachers that they can't approach a child going into a different bathroom, even if they're blatantly not questioning what their gender is, you can't even approach them because that violates their rights. You desensitize teachers. And so that's why they're like, why are you making the rape at Thomas Dale about transgender? I'm not. I'm making it about the policy that was created that told teachers they can't. So it desensitizes them to where human nature is, if you see a boy walking into a girl's bathroom in a school, you question that. But when you tie teachers' hands and you tell them, no, you're violating that child's rights. First of all, it's not a right. Is that what we have to get back to? Is that that's not a right? Is that we actually have civil liberties and we have rights, but none of this is a right. But that's why it's a transgender issue. Is not. I'm not saying that it was. I'm so tired of the ACLU and their. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that you have created a safety issue with something that makes zero sense. And you're 100%. I told the mother of that child, this county has multiple dads going up in front of the school board saying, my daughter was walked in on. My daughter was this. My daughter was that. My daughter was that. They were warned. And they just sat there like, okay. Okay. Doing nothing about it. So could it have been prevented? 100%.
Absolutely. They don't ask. This is something that I've really been giving a lot of thought to since I have been picking apart some of these policies and realizing just how egregious they are with their language, because they don't formally define things and they never ask, and then what? And then what happens when we allow boys and girls to share bathrooms? And then what happens when we put in policy 8040, which is the rights of transgender students, right? What happens when we say, oh, if a parent isn't okay with a child being called a certain name, then we may contact and offer an alternative to the parent rather than shall. And people don't understand what the difference is between may and shall. So when you have a policy that says may, that lets the school board off the hook. That lets the school board say, we can do whatever we want and shove you to the side, mom or dad or birthing parent.
I have the actual name change, gender change, and the support plan because since Chesterfield adopted it 100%. And the support plan actually says, does student have support of their parent? And then there's a check, yes or no. And then under no, it's, so we're going to create their support system for them. And then under name change, will parent be participating? Yes or no. And so here's the expectation is that you can call your child's school and ask them if they've changed their gender or their name, and the school has to tell you. That's what they consider under this, it's not even a veil, like the opaque, like that's what they call is due diligence in notifying parents, is that every parent should call the school and find out if your child has decided to be a different sex, because there's two. Until the Supreme Court says otherwise. That's what we have to get back to also, is that you don't get to interpret the Constitution. You don't get to interpret the Code of Virginia to what you want it to say. Is, you know, in Fairfax, the compelled, like, that blows my mind, because part of the First Amendment is compelled speech. And I can't even like the outrage that that makes me feel like, to tell a child that it has to call another child. Loudoun County teachers won that last year. So it leaves me with so many questions of, where are the people that we elected in November? Is, you know, that's the only question that because a lot of people know my feeling on that matter, and I don't want to get into that today, but where are they that took such strong stance on education to get elected, that are now elected? Is that somebody has to step in, and it's going to have to be the parents, the teachers running for school board. And I love when people say, parents, I mean, they have no clue about education and how are they going to run the school board. That myth of you have to one be an educator to run a school board, and that parents of all people would never know how to run a school board, because none of our school boards have actually read the Code of Virginia or actually read their policies, is what we have run into here. We had our chairwoman who was still voting on equity based on what equity used to mean. She had never read the 2017 equity report by James Lane, Carrie Coyner from Chesterfield, she created the equity report, but ran and got elected as a delegate as a Republican. So if we're going to talk about holding our elected officials responsible, and then she voted down every parental right child protection bill in the House. So she created this equity committee, 70 pages of explicit racism about we need more Black teachers because white teachers can't teach Black children, like that kind of stuff. She never read that. So the expectation that school board members, if you're running, you have to know everything. Well, I think that Virginia has shown that is a complete myth because none of them have any clue what's going on in the first place.
No, and I think the bigger thing is that people never paid attention before.
No.
They did not pay any attention to school board because they just figured their property taxes.
I never voted.
I didn't pay attention to school board. I never thought twice about it because I trusted that I had my kids in a good school system because it was, right? Your taxpayer dollars are going to fund schools, and if you're told that the schools are good and you look up great schools and you check the ratings and you see, oh, great, awesome, 9 out of 10, 8 out of 10, we're in a good space. But this is going to change now. And I do believe that everybody knows, and people are going to be a lot more discerning about who they elect to school board, especially those people that have woken up and found out that it is the most local politics that affect you the most.
Yes.
So, I mean, that's where we are. And I would also say that people need to do their research. They really need to look at what these candidates are saying, because I am the only candidate in my district right now. We've got 3 candidates. I am the only candidate who is touching the third rail every day.
Yeah.
And I'm touching, and that's why I say, if I was doing this, if I was in this fight for politics, I wouldn't be touching the third rail. I'd probably be talking about electric buses.
Now, for those that are watching, that don't know, what is the third rail?
So the third rail is basically like, you don't want to touch that. In politics, you don't want to touch the third rail, because when you touch the third rail, it's like political suicide.
Correct.
Right? Like, so someone who touches the third rail is setting themselves up to be blasted politically. It's like being politically incorrect.
Right. So when I say run hard on hard issues, you need to ask your candidates, how do you feel? And if they give you some vague answer, or they kind of glaze over it without a firm position, then that tells you everything that you need to know. Is that if you don't have a candidate running firm, now they can run under whatever political party they want to, but that has shown us all over this state that means nothing. Nothing. Even in the House and the Senate means nothing to run under a political party. You have to ask them explicit questions, and they need to have detailed answers. They need to know what they're talking about, or even that they even know what you're talking about. Because if you have a candidate, when you say, what is your position on social emotional learning, or data collection, or, forced cultural competency education, and they don't know, one, in any detail what any of that is, or everybody should know in explicit detail what it is, not what they're told it is, the harm of it, and then what are you going to do about it is that we have to start asking the questions, because you're right. The great awakening, like, of parents, it has been slow, but it's happening. And with these school board elections is that we cannot rely on anybody. We learned November 2nd, and what has not happened is that it has to come down to the extremely local level. And we have to start taking the US, the state, what's going to happen for our children back for ourselves.
Yes, it's our vigilance that matters. It's our vigilance that will, I think, that will start to help us chip away at this war on our children. And I mentioned earlier my advocacy, obviously, for special education students, my advocacy for teachers, my advocacy for my own children, removing identity politics. But another major pillar of my platform is parents' rights. It's our parents' rights. I mean, you have a fundamental right to the education and upbringing of your children in the state of Virginia. It is not the government's job to raise my kids. It is not the government's job to guide morality for my children with using the vehicle of social emotional learning. No. And furthermore, these programs that are coming into our schools, these prepackaged programs, and it is not just the 30 minutes or the 20 minutes, whatever it is, of second step. It is baked into everything that these kids are encountering daily. These programs that are coming in are affiliated with, like, Second Step Learning for Justice, and then Newzella, who gets their materials from the Zen Education Project, a known political activist group. This is not, I'm not okaying that for my kids.
They're all, and I call it, it's literally the 2, maybe 3 degrees of Kevin Bacon is what I call it, is that you can take one, whether it's a web app or whether it's anything involved in the public school education system right now. Now, keep in mind is that when we say public education, this has now gone into private schools, which was part of the ARP, EANS, is when I say, like, it was very systematic, is that if you're going to pull your child out and send them to private school, you have to do your homework. And the number one question is, did you take the money? And if they say yes, but, the conversation ends, because it was 100. There's no more they can tell you all day long, but we don't do that. But nope. But yeah, is that all of these are connected by the 1% of the 1% who run the world. Is that if you have a program, so you have the same, we'll use good old Gates. If you have the same man who is running pharmaceutical companies that is also now running education, because all of these, so Second Step is owned by Committee for Children, which is the nonprofit that owns the for-profit. It's funded by Gates, Chan Zuckerberg. The Whole Child Initiative, that's Chan Zuckerberg. Community schools, which I don't think a lot of people in Virginia even understand that we have, but those are strictly social emotional learning schools that it's on the VDOE site. I didn't know. I'd heard, different, people all over the nation who were big into this talking about communities in community schools. And I was like, what? And then there's a whole manual. Chesterfield has 10. Now what it is they're micro mini schools inside of our schools. But that's another, Gates, Chan Zuckerberg, and it also involves Bloomberg. It's the Koch brothers. Emerson Collective is another one. Now that's Steve Jobs is his widow. You've got the Bezos Foundation. There's probably 10 or 15, but really the big ones are going. You can take one web app and then look and see who that they're funded by, and then it's going to come from a venture capital, and then that's where you get the money. And it's literally, I haven't gotten further than 3 degrees away from who's really funding these web apps. And so people have to question that. Like, do you want Bill Gates determining your child's education? Like, it comes down to, and then I would encourage everybody too to go on the Virginia Association for School Superintendent, the VASS page, and look and see who they're partnered with. It's every single web app that we have. And then ask the question of, well, why aren't they pulling them out? Well, because they're partnered with them. So we're in working with, when people are bringing in new superintendents, insisting that they do not join the Virginia Association for School Superintendents is one thing that I would suggest too, is because is understanding how the whole process works. That's a big thing too. But I wanted to ask, and we've decided, we're going to have to do a series, because your special education, I think is one that's huge, that nobody is talking about. But also, you mentioned being a teacher, but also behavior analyst. So that tying into it. And so we have a teacher here telling us that this is wrong. Okay. But also you have somebody whose job is behavior telling you that. So this isn't just me as a parent and a researcher using my common sense and my research to tell you it's wrong. We have somebody here educated in it telling us. And so we're going to have to, make this maybe a weekly, maybe more than that, but we'll break it apart so it's not too much for people to digest. But is what at the current level, what we know about what the Loudoun County School Board and the superintendent are proven to have done, what is your observation as to why they're still sitting on that school board?
Well, they say that they were elected, right? We were elected to this school board in 2019, and this is what this is democracy, right? We were elected to the school board, and we're serving our term.
So because nobody has actually taken them to criminal court, because they have committed felonies, multiple felonies, covering up a felony, and then after the fact, which led to another felony, which this is basically, I'm not a lawyer, but they have crimes they should be in jail for. And so the system that we have in Virginia is really the issue, because there's nobody to hold anybody accountable, is what I see. Is that we see people trying to hold people, and it's not just Loudoun, is that we see parents who can find an attorney and then maybe afford one, trying to do what's right to help not just their child, but all children. And then they're $250,000 later, they have mortgages that they'll never pay off, court case, and then it doesn't get anywhere. So
now you do know. So I don't know if you're aware of this, and I will want to make sure I touch on this, that the special grand jury that they in Loudoun County, they tried to stop that from happening. Yes. That was not successful for them, thankfully. So that's continuing. That's moving forward. So that is a good thing. So I will say that we are moving in the right direction there.
I was relieved to see that, because for a while I felt like it was crickets, and I was really starting to get worried.
Right. So they are not above the law. And I think that's, unfortunately, it's taken this long for us to get to that point. It's horrendous that it's taken this long, but the message is loud and clear now. They are not above the law, and things will proceed with that special grand jury investigation.
And that's important too, because I was really worried about the Supreme Court for a long time, because, in destabilizing a nation, once the government is gone, the education is gone. And so my worry was, what is the Supreme Court going to do? Because once the law goes, when they've claimed education and the government, and so that was my big fear for a while, waiting to see what was going to happen with this, was because once the law goes, it's gone. And so that's why it's a relief to hear. So what's the word on the special grand jury? Like, do you know the process of how that's going to work out or play out? Or
I don't know all the legalese. That's not my area of expertise. Right. I just know that it's moving forward. And I know that while they may have thought they could successfully ride that injunction, they will not. So that it's over. They've determined that's going to move forward. That will play out in the courts. Like I said, that's not my area of expertise, but I know that it's moving forward. And that is a positive thing for the parents of Loudoun County.
Yes, absolutely. And what would, as far as the data piece, do parents in Loudoun even really know or understand like the web apps, or like something that I've really gotten loud about, and I'm, if you can talk to Delegate LaRock, I would really like to get the word textbook removed from the Code of Virginia, because that's where we're losing a lot of stuff as parents. We know there's no textbooks. Okay. They mean web apps. So is that we have to make the verbiage correct, and notification of parents of the web apps, and that they can opt their child out of data collection. Is there really any talk up there, or is it still strict, really? Because you were when you mentioned Newsella, I was like, okay, she gets it. Like it's rare. It's rare that I hear people I don't know start speaking strongly about issues that I understand, and I'm trying to get other people to understand. Is that lost up there, or are you finding that when you mention things like Newsella that people understand?
I think that the big concern for parents here has been, what are the kids being taught? Some with the data collection, I think people kind of got honed in on the data collection when it came to second step social emotional learning, because they understood that was a part of the process. However, we've been told by Loudoun County, we're not collecting any data. We're not doing that. We're not collecting data. But you were the one that actually brought it to my attention that, with sites like Newsella, right, that they are collecting that they can collect it because they've accessed it. The kids have accessed it on their Chromebooks through Schoology or whatever it may be. I actually didn't go that far yet into the weeds, because my concern was with Newsella was, wait a second. My son read The Outsiders in his English class this year. Okay.
English class, guys. It's when so when we talk second step, like that is the actual curriculum for social emotional learning, but it is and they use the word embed into everything. Okay. It's in English. Read your kids' English assignments. It's in everything.
Right, and it is. And so this is how you know that, because while my son was assigned to read The Outsiders, okay, classic book, alongside that, he was assigned to read a series of articles from Newsella. Newsella paired the articles with The Outsiders. It's a one-stop shop, so teachers don't have to put in the time and effort to pull assignments. So they pulled these articles, implicit bias. There was an article on implicit bias
related to anything,
okay, that was assigned to my son that somehow Newsella decided correlated with the outsiders. And that's what raised the red flag to me, because I have done my homework and I know where that comes from. I know about implicit bias. I know what that means. And I know what the goal is for assigning our kids articles that say that teachers will treat kids with darker skin differently than teachers or than children with lighter skin. That's flat out racism right there.
It is racism 100%. And like, I don't mix words with people, is that your pretty little diagram of children on, because they don't believe that giving all children the same opportunity, which is that little milk crate that they put these little short and tall children on. So you're going to give one child more, not based on their need, because that's how they get away with it, because you're not doing an evaluation on each individual child's need. You're doing it based on skin color, and that is racism. And it violates the Equality Act of 1964, point blank.
Exactly. And I think me being a behavior analyst and understanding how critical it is that you develop individualized treatment plans for your, if anybody understands what individualizing means, it's me. I know what individualizing means. Now, do I understand that you can't individualize everything for every student in a school system that has 82,000 plus students? Of course I understand that. But I also understand what definitions mean. And I know that words have meaning. And when you start culturally responsive instruction, when you start throwing that type of terminology out there without defining what is that, what materials are appropriate for culturally responsive instruction and what materials are not appropriate, because we can sit here and say, absolutely, do I believe that children should see themselves in school? Of course they should see themselves. Of course we should embrace. Of course we should celebrate differences, right? But what does that mean? And because that has never been defined, it gets to be whatever anybody feels like they want it to be. It gets to be whatever the glisten, right? It gets to be whatever glisten feels like it wants it to be. And then we all have to embrace it. And if we don't embrace it, then we're hateful.
Right. Yeah. And it takes very strong people who know. And that's when I realized that I'm not racist. Like, I was raised to love people for who they are, to not see skin color. And so to tell me that I now have to acknowledge all the time, which is what they're teaching children, which is what equity is that you're going to teach my children to not just love people until they're given a reason not to, is that my child has to constantly acknowledge a child's skin color. They're different. And if they don't, then they're now racist. And that's the big thing about, and understanding anti-racism is very key to all of this too, is because people, if you don't know what, you're against racism. No, is that they're teaching, it's literally explicit. And that when you see words like agency and you want the child to be global citizen, like it's the collective is, and then when they're teaching your children to advocate, when you see that word, and it's on the VDOE SEL site. It breaks it down by grade, starting in kindergarten.
Oh yeah,
you can see the progression. Yes, because social awareness then becomes, by middle school, you are seeing full on like activism. You are seeing full, so it starts out, okay, I don't know, like, but you also have to, when you teach a child empathy, to empathize, you're teaching children, like I want my children to have boundaries. Stranger danger. A child is, bullying them or picking on a boy is following, because I have two daughters, on the playground, being inappropriate. That's what I want my child But what they're teaching when they say empathy is that if you go to that teacher, you are not being a good friend. You are not being, and it's part of breaking down the child's identity, and it's part of then which leads into the hypersexualizing them. But you're also teaching them empathy to, if a girl was to walk into a bathroom and there's a boy in there, not to be alarmed like children should be, adults should be, but to empathize with what that child is going through. And so it's very complex, but the foundation of it is that we have to get back to the fact that we have to let children be children as long as they can be. But yes, and we'll go into further what the because now that I've opened your eyes as to what the data does, because everybody knows what Panorama. You guys, you use Panorama.
Yep.
Everybody knows Merrick Garland Panorama bad.
Yep. We
use Aperture, but these are two. They are literally so. Panorama isn't just social emotional learning. I actually have Stafford County as a teacher send it to me, their entire Panorama, what they get. And so it's the questions, but it's not only the questions, it's the dashboard that the teachers then input the data from Panorama, which is aligned with Second Step. And so it's not just the curriculum that's bad, it's what happens after it, so Panorama, they're aligned with something called Devereaux, which is DESA Mini, and they have it for Head Start. It's called DECA, and it is for toddlers, social emotional learning, behavior analysis on toddlers, on pre-K. So then they input this data, and it's completely subjective questions like, has the child done something nice for another child? Okay. Did you see it or did you not? It's subjective questions. Does the child listen to listen? That's subject, teachers are human. But one is that the majority don't understand what these questions are doing, because they're under the Library of Virginia, they sit in the statewide longitudinal data system, which is another federal grant, for 75 years. After the child graduates. So we're talking about a generational social credit score, because my data locker will then be passed on. It'll become they're all interconnected for 75 years. And the next we'll talk about, and I'll show you, but they produce these scores. So based on these subjective questions that teachers answer, now they just adopted in Chesterfield that 9th through 12th, they do their own self-reporting, whether they, talked to somebody of a different ethnicity, like questions like that. They're self-reporting in high school now here in Chesterfield County. So if it's going on here, it's going on and that's what we need to understand, is that what we see happen in Loudoun, I tell for 6 months, I said, a cloud has not set over Loudoun County. It's not doom, God is not true. Yeah. It's just, it's the symptom of the illness.
Yes, it is.
And so what you see going on in, say, Loudoun, Fairfax, Spotsylvania, wherever, up 95, wherever you are, you need to start examining, because all of this has been funded by your school, by the federal government.
Yes.
So if you see it happening somewhere in a big county, you need to start looking, because I guarantee you, even if you think that you have the greatest school board ever, if your school board took the money, they took the stipulations.
Yep.
It's the same thing to do. So we know the contracts, and real quick, I'm going to show, the let's see. Let's look at the soul. How many soul? This is Loudoun County. How many soul contracts you guys have now? Sole sponsor. Why am I having a brain fart? Sole source contracts. Okay. Sole source contracts are no bid. They don't. Some you'll see offering, like they'll post them, and companies are then submit their bids to have this contract fulfilled. But sole source contracts are no bids. The counties seek them out. And so the intent is very clear. And the sole source contracts are meant to have specific, like, emergency construction, things like that. So when you have sole source contracts that are, you guys definitely have the most copious amount, like, of sole source contracts that I've seen. But it's all of your school stuff. And so you have to then ask the question of, why are these why did Loudoun County, which is then going to be Chesterfield, it's everybody has sought these, because why? The government told them you have to use them. But so I think that's as zoomed in as I can get, but let me see if I open up Google Docs. That's easier. Nope, made it worse. All right. So right here, I can't get any further, I don't think. But so this is just to show you. These are your sole source. This 4 pages of sole source contracts. You can see the and I will for you guys, and I think I posted some of this on Twitter before, but so you've got, and then it breaks it down for you. And let me see. I think
I see Newsella there.
Yeah, Newsella.
Oh yeah.
You've got the big ones. So you've got, and then it'll break down the contract amount. No red ink.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
Green box.
Know all about that.
Okay, McGraw-Hill. You have to understand that when you see like McGraw-Hill, they used to produce textbooks.
Oh yes.
And so they had to evolve when textbooks went away. But these are also sources of the books.
Yep.
Which Loudoun County, I also found you have a contract with Barnes and Noble and Amazon, who are 2 of the biggest producers of the book problem.
Yep.
So no red ink is another big one. So, and then it breaks down the dollars. And so these.
How much for Newsella?
$400 and almost $500,000.
That's nice. And you know, when I asked my question that was never answered.
Yeah.
You know, the person who brought that into our school system never answered my question or my concern.
Mm-hmm. But the thing is that people need to understand is this too. Now, some counties are easier than others. I found that the counties who are the most like blatant about equity and like Fairfax, Loudoun, Chesterfield County, because Chesterfield's the ringer in all this, is that's the one that people are like, really? And I'm like, God, yes, y'all don't even know. And that's the James Lane factor. But is that the ones that are easiest to find information, like you can type in Loudoun County Public School procurement. You can find this website that easy. You can find, so the same thing with Fairfax. It's very easy to find. Chesterfield County, same thing. Procurement is a big word. Purchasing, or for you guys, I went to go find it because I didn't feel like searching through my files, and I typed in Loudoun County sole source contracts, and the link popped right up. So get your screenshots, download it while you can, because but under open government is that they have to be available somewhere.
Yeah.
So I've been able, there's something called, it's EVA portal, and that's what a lot of counties use, but you can find the contracts. It's not going to be as, Chesterfield County doesn't even have a list like this. Virginia Beach is another one that's very transparent or just has other things going on. But you, by far, this is just sole source, I'll remind you. I would like, and this is where the Lego thing comes in, because our new governor just a $1 billion Lego contract here in Chesterfield County. Lego is a global company that is part of the metaverse. Okay. So when I saw this, the first thing when I said Lego, that I guarantee you that $620,000 was not spent on Lego blocks. Lego Ventures is one that everybody should look up. But that wasn't only the first one. Where did I see it again? I saw another Lego, but it was a similar amount. Is that I guarantee you it was like a total of $1.3 million on Legos. Are you kidding me? And those are the questions that people need to start answering. But real quick, is that another one that I wanted to point out? Oh, here's Edgenuity. So these are like knowing is that I can tell you, I can see these and I'm like, like just, but anything I would, Ascend. Like I can go through here. I'm like, oh, yep. Like just because of, but the one that Houghton Mifflin is another one that used to be a textbook company that's supplying all this stuff. But is that you would look at this money, and ask, look, Tools of the Mind STEP program, like that's one I want to look up now. Look, Northwest Evaluation Association research that's for MAP. You know, is that, so that's how I find stuff out, is I'm like, what is that? Okay, so here's one, Naviance, that you should, school counseling services. That's one that, and then that I would, so when you see a sole source for school counseling services, because a lot of people also don't know that telemedicine under COVID was found to be appropriate for children for who needed school counseling. Well, even now that they're back in school, they've never gotten rid of it.
Right. That's true. Yeah.
And so those are questions that we need, because North Carolina, I've worked a lot with Ed First Alliance, is that's where they're finding, because in loco parentis, a child can be calling a telemed health therapist, because in loco parentis, that's where they've gotten around all of this, is that this all has to have parental approval. But in loco parentis, when we put our kid on that school bus, the school can give parental consent.
Right.
And so that's what, when you, well, I would never allow my child to get, guess what? You don't have to give the approval. But real quick, Gaggle. Gaggle is one that, so a lot of people don't know this either, is that, so we use Gaggle also, but there's a couple, Bark, which is funny because that's what it's called. But there's 4 main ones, and I'm having a total brain fart as to what they are. I'll tell you in a second. But Gaggle is, you can look it up, and it's the one that has the most press. Is that, so in 2013, state legislation made it mandatory that every school board had to adopt threat assessment teams. The first state ever, 2013 threat assessment teams. So 1, nobody knows about that. And 2, the threat assessment teams then had to, with these one-to-one devices, they had to have constant monitoring. Gaggle is one that you can Google it. And so Gaggle, and that's where these contracts come into play, is that they give third-party vendors and subcontractors, which are 10 people they pay $10 an hour with. Either they're in between jobs and they sit at home on their computer, and when a child innocently, looks up something, an algorithm or artificial intelligence flags these strangers that your child has a child, and if they don't, and then they have like a certain amount of time to produce, and if they don't like flag enough children. So that's another is the flagging, is that nobody knows this is going on.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you read that, so this is what I was told. Well, how do I know my child's safe on this Chromebook? Well, they're monitored by a company. So I'm thinking now granted, I've only been doing this since August 10th. So I think back like, okay, they have a company. No, we need to start understanding that they are, and that's part of these contracts, is it says implicit, the county does not own the data. If the county wants access to the data, they have to then go to the company. So that's why it takes if you were to file under COPA, which if you go to vafcf.org, there's a privacy manual. It has all the forms to collect. You can even get the data that's been collected on your child, but you first have to know the web apps, because the county, why would you have to know the web apps if the county had access to their own data? They don't. You have to list the companies so you would then have to know what web apps. Thanks, Bobby. That's my co-founder. He always chimes in with the info. And so you have to know the web apps, and that's why they have to tell you, but they're so if you go to your page, if you click through your school's page enough, it took me 20 minutes to find, it was buried under Chromebook deployment, our list of web apps, and it wasn't even a complete list. But they're collecting data on clicks, everything your child does in Google Chrome, in Google Classrooms, everything that your child does, everything they type in. And so these questions, like we talked about, the assignment my daughter got, they're collecting data on parents. Mm-hmm. So asking what prescription medications were in my house and an opioid module. But then it's things like, let's get to know you. I don't like those things that look traditional. But then it goes into, do you have a supportive parent at home? And it starts to get very frightening now that they're talking about they have brought social workers into schools. And you start stuff about, it's already happening, is that they want to, and they're going to, they haven't had, I don't even know when the last time I actually had a conference was, probably kindergarten. But now they want to start doing teacher home visits. That ties in with social workers. Now, this is my life's work before this, was working with CPS and child sex trafficking. Is one thing that I will close with, is that the involvement of social workers in schools should send off alarm bells. And if you ever, I don't care who they are, if your teacher shows up with do not ever let them in your house. That's the one thing, is because the mental health crisis that COVID created, that the NEA predicted in 2018, has created. So now, under current legislation, is that there's such a mental health crisis that we have to lower the bar on what actually makes a school counselor. So that's when they're bringing in something called paraprofessionals. Mm-hmm. So they've lowered the bar, like teachers. Oh, you don't have to do student teaching anymore. So they're lowering. So the answer to a mental health crisis is not to lower the bar on who's taking care of our children. But that legislation was just passed this last legislative session.
So let me ask you a quick question. I have a question about that. Is that where the free counseling comes in?
Oh yeah.
Is that where that, because that's coming.
Yeah.
That's coming. That's where the free, yeah. What there's no such
North
thing as free.
Carolina is a good state to follow what's going on there, because believe it or not, is that Virginia and North Carolina for all of this, because New York City, California, they are so like, no, those parents are like, you're not doing that to my kid. Nope. Like, because whether they get it in its entirety or not, they don't want anybody. They don't trust the government, the police enough that whether we agree with their politics or not, they have been the loudest about all of this for years now. But North Carolina is a good one to follow, because North Carolina and Virginia, which shocks people for this level, is that I feel like that we're the guinea pig states. But yes, so they're going to, is that if you read the Virginia Code, when they talk about in loco parentis is extremely frightening, because it gives them the authority for pretty much anything medical for your child. So when we look at the transgender issue, is that we also have to look at the fact of right now, the whole like puberty blockers, hormone therapy. It's a no, we would never do that. But how many times have we turned that and then we wake up and something that we were told would never happen is happening? Is that the possibility of our children not only being able to say they're another gender, but to begin to transition without us it's not even on the horizon. Like, it's there. It is. And that's why the upcoming Senate race is that because the education committee of Lucas, Hashmi, all of them, is that as long as the Senate is stacked with that Senate education and the subcommittees, I mean, they're always going to add provisions that they're, whether a Republican bipartisan bill or anything is going, well, my bill got passed, but it had the provisions added. The provisions made it mean nothing. But is that I would encourage everybody, and this includes our legislators, to go through the Virginia Code, especially it's 8. So VIII, there's education. It's like it would be like the basis of the Constitution. It doesn't break down into any dots. Like it's the basis of the Constitution, the Code of Virginia, and it nothing else should be added. Because right now we've got this sexually explicit material debate, whatever's supposed to come out the end of the month from the VDOE, but the Code of Virginia under education since 1974 has given the Virginia Department of Education the responsibility for all curriculum and textbooks that go into the schools. So we have legislators writing bills that now are in contradiction with the basis of the Code of Virginia. Is that the town hall for that is still open.
Yes, it
and
is.
There's another section of the Code of Virginia that says if during the town hall period you can comment that there is a law in contradiction, they have to at least put it off by 30 days or revisit the law being adopted at all. Because having a law stating that a Virginia Department of Education that is still questionable whether we can trust them or not because we don't know what they're going to create, honestly. If but when we already know that there's code, basic code of Virginia, that they should have been doing this all along, is that my suggestion is that to make it known in the town hall that there's already code on this, so that we at least have more time to figure out even if it's 30 days, to figure, because Donovan first stated that there would be no town hall on this because they didn't have time, because they wanted to get it done before school started. And then miraculously, somebody sent me the town hall like 2 weeks ago when there was never supposed to be one. Is at least yes, school is coming, but I can guarantee you the last thing that we want to do is force, because school's getting ready to start. We don't want to force the VDOE on these, because it could end up being a good thing, but is that the rush to make the rush to make something go through before school starts, because it's not going to get implemented before school starts anyway, if they listen to it, like divisive concepts. So the town hall is open. So even if you don't want to mention what we just talked about, go in, and I will, on multiple places, post the link to that. And if you're on Twitter or Facebook or wherever you follow me, I've shared it a couple times. But go in and use the town hall and tell them, because the law is what we talked about, very vague as to what it actually means, and what you as a parent want, what you believe, even if that's just the basis of it. You don't have to know anything other than what you don't want your child exposed to. That's all it has to be. And that's what a town hall is meant to be, is as a parent, I don't want my child exposed to X, Y, and Z. It doesn't have to be a debate. It doesn't have to be anything. But yeah, so I'm happy to any questions that you have after this, but yeah, we will reconvene, and it was awesome having you. And if I can, any of our other people, because I probably talked to about 10 people running for school board all over the state, is if I'm sure that you would be welcome to allies, up with and help people be firm and secure in what they believe, and that it's okay to run with conviction that what you're doing is right.
We have to. That's the only way to go now. It should have always been the only way to go, but
right.
We have to have people that are running on conviction. And
right.
I wanted to say thank you for having me on, and thank you for sharing your wealth of information. You are incredible. And the amount of research that you have done in such a short time is astounding. You are an amazing.
I wondered for 40 years what this big brain, this big mouth, and the amount of capacity of information that I could store in here, and what was my point on this earth? And well, it appears that God has given it to me.
You have found it. It's really, I don't even have words for what you have shared with me. And it's so refreshing to connect with people who have done that deep dive, who have taken all of their spare time to dig in and find out what's really going on, and to be able to, and this is not a theory of yours. This is not through your lens. This is called facts and evidence, and that cannot be refuted.
Right. 100%. Well, it has been amazing, and we will do this again. But Tiffany for Broad Run, guys, and I always welcome, because I don't operate on either side of the fence. I operate on truth and fact, and perspective. And so anybody who is probably trolling in an opposition and wants to have an open conversation, because I believe that honest, open conversations. So if there's anybody that ever wants to join and have a conversation face to face and not behind a keyboard, I'm always welcome to do that. Also, because we have to start having the conversations with the people who don't agree with us too. And because bridging that gap, because in the end, what this comes down to is it's not about equity. It's not about transgender. It's not about, none of this serves any child. I mean, it's been going on for years and the behavior's gotten worse. The scores have gotten worse. This is not about educating the children. Is that we have to help. I mean, this is an assault on America and breaking down the foundation of America. And if we could get more people to see past politics and past what you believe my political affiliation is, because I'm not a member of any political party, is because I follow my moral code and I don't care. Is that I'm always going to ask people the questions, the hard questions, even the people that are in political parties that I work with. If I don't agree with something or I don't think that something that they're doing is right for the children, is that I'm going to point that out and I'm going to try to educate them. And I would also, a couple of, I spoke with John McGuire and a couple people, and I said, can we please help you write proper legislation? And he was like, absolutely, let's do it. He was like, and so when you have people in those positions that don't challenge you or think that they know everything, those are the people that we need to embrace and start when we have the knowledge, because the expectation that because they're elected, they know everything. I think that also has to be, they don't. They're writing legislation based on what their limited knowledge. They're trying to do right by the children, and a lot of them, they're failing because they're not understanding the whole thing. Is reach out to your delegates, unless you're in Chesterfield, but then that's a whole different story. And extend that. Hey, do you understand how this works? You'll find out quickly who's receptive to actually wanting to change Virginia for the children. But yes, is that the wealth of knowledge, it is a curse, but it has also proved to be, when people are receptive to hear it and to want to understand more, then it pays off for the sleepless nights and the nightmares and stuff and the never ending thread that I pull. So, thank you. We will do this again. And I will send you lots of fun stuff to go through regarding how these, what these surveys are actually doing. And then it will really blow your mind to see what's being produced by social, because we had talked about the content. Now we need to understand the process. And we will do this again next week.
Okay, that sounds great.
All right. Thank you, Tiffany, for Broad Run.
Thank you. Have a great rest of the weekend. Thank you so much for your time.
We are cheering you guys on. All right.
Thank you.
Take
Bye.
care. Bye.